I feel like every February is an opportunity for us to talk about Black history, the trials, tribulations, struggles, and achievements of Black folks. And since I'm at the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, people ask me to come and speak sometimes. And I was born in East Oakland. One of the last times I've been in a classroom here is when I was here at summer school because I had failed math. I was one of those kids that was tracked in special ed from the very beginning, born and raised in Oakland, and I was what they call a throwaway kid, and nobody cared about me. And now I run a $2 million organization with 24 people that work with me, trying to change our community for the better. And it's because somebody reached out and had a conversation with me one day and shared some stuff with me and asked me questions that changed my life. And so, even though I'm sick as a dog and you could hear it, I still couldn't not be here. I'm not contagious. I wouldn't come here and, contaminate the school. I'm not contagious, but, I still got this cold in my chest. So I want to apologize for that. But as the professor said, I'm Jakada Imani. I'm with the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights. We're a 13-year-old organization working to find and promote solutions that lift up low-income communities, communities of color, and urban communities all over the country. We work in a few different fields, really moving and pushing policy, violence prevention, juvenile justice reform, and corrections reform overall. Green-collar jobs. Our founder, Van Jones, one of the first people to talk about this idea of greening our economy and creating an economy that doesn't pollute and destroy the environment, but restores or cleans up the environment. And then civic engagement, really engaging people in transforming their own communities. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today. I came to the Ella Baker Center 10 years ago after doing a bunch of different stuff. I shared with you all before a little bit. I grew up in East Oakland, and I grew up during the height of the crack epidemic. Many of the people in my family, including my parents, used crack. People in my family, probably including my parents, sold crack. And what I saw was the devastating impact that drugs are having on my community. Not just my family, but my entire neighborhood. And what was even more striking to me was how much resources the government was spending adding damage to damage, right? Locking people up, incarcerating people, breaking apart families, that only made the problems worse. I had a friend, when he was in college, did a study about the war on drugs, and he found that every single tactic that the U.S. government employed on the war on drugs made the drug trade more violent, but ultimately more profitable. So it made drugs more profitable. Everything they tried to do to stop it, which is the exact opposite thing you'd want to do, right? You'd want to strip the profit out of it. So for me, growing up in the 80s, there was this contradiction that my family on drugs and drugs ravaging my community, the government marauding through my community. I remember, task force used to drive up and down our block with the door slightly ajar so they could just bounce out on people. And at the same time, I'm from Oakland, which is home of the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers. And we had a huge tradition of social justice and social change. The first black union started in West Oakland, right? The Porters Union, on the trains, unionizing, fighting for a living wage. East Oakland, historically, was a working class community. People could walk to work in factories, had good jobs, people could own homes. But something had changed and I couldn't really figure it out. I came to the Ella Baker Center because we stood up for the young people who was just standing on the corner getting knocked upside the head by the police, and then they would say, yo, the police knocked me upside my head and they did this, and that, and the third. And people would say, well, why were you standing on the corner? Well, you must have been out there doing something. They don't just get you for nothing. And the Ella Baker Center stood up and said, actually, we're going to provide those folks lawyers, and we're going to provide those folks attorneys, and we're going to work to get justice for families who have been brutalized by police or whose loved ones have been killed by police. And for me, you know, having done a lot of different social justice work, seeing the Ella Baker Center really was willing to stand up for people who, even organizations that historically have stood up for us, whether it was the civil rights organizations or the black church, that at a certain point turned their back on young black people, that the Ella Baker Center was still willing to stand up for those folks. And, you know, I worked at the Ella Baker Center for, like I said, the last 10 years. 2 years ago, I became the executive director. And one of the things that was really important to me after growing up in Oakland and seeing the changes was that the Ella Baker Center started really having an impact here in Oakland. We do a lot of work statewide, but that we needed a vision for Oakland that was really about lifting up the people who are here now. So much of what you see in the economic development strategy of the city of Oakland is this idea of market rate housing. So we're going to build as much condos and as much fancy housing as we can so people who live further out in San Jose or Dublin or Newark will want to come and live in Oakland because it's closer to San Francisco. And then this idea of retail. So then, you know, people want to shop. We can keep people spending money in Oakland. Well, the thing about that is neither of those have jobs that actually provide you a living wage. Now, you might be able to get a construction job for a little bit, putting up these condos, but then can you afford the rent or the mortgage to live in them? Now, that wasn't a rhetorical question. Can you actually afford the rent in these condos downtown? Anybody? No? Okay. Now, you could go and get a job, you know, at, when they had thrown up Kmart down here for a little bit, and it stayed until the subsidies ran out, but you could get a job at Kmart, and now they put up there Home Depot. My brother worked over there. They got all these other retail spots, the Gap and whatnot. Does that afford, if you get those jobs, could you still buy a house up in the hills or buy a house even in East Oakland? Or, no. So the economic development strategy of the city that the city is pursuing right now is a strategy that displaces you. That says there's not a place for you here in the future. And maybe you could go on to Antioch or Stockton or Richmond, Vallejo, something else, but right here, right now, not so much. But then you could come back to work, right? Like you peep that over at Emeryville. Who people got a job over there in Emeryville, working on this, over there in Emeryville in the stores and stuff? Okay, one person, that's good. We don't even know people got jobs in Emeryville, damn. Much less work in Emeryville. Okay, are you digging what I'm saying? So the economic development strategy for the region isn't based on your success, right? Isn't based on offering you the kind of jobs. So as the Ella Baker Center looked at that, particularly living through the 90s and seeing the dot-com bubble where all of a sudden there was, 20-year-olds driving Jaguars across the Bay Bridge because they was living in Silicon Valley and they got themselves a Silicon Valley job and an IPO and a blah, 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 but still unemployment rate in Oakland is in double digits, right? And so we saw this green thing coming and we said, well, we got to get us up on that for two reasons. We have to get us up on this green thing. One is so many of where we live, as people of color, as black people in particular, is polluted. It's completely, they call them brownfields. Some of them are called Superfund sites. I used to live in West Oakland on Lower Bottoms where there had been a chemical factory for years and years and years just spilling stuff out onto the ground. They discovered that the soil was so polluted so deep down that they paid people to stay at hotels while they dug it up and drove it out.